And welcome to Weather and Ag in Focus on this Monday, February 10th, 2025. I'm Chief Meteorologist Dean Wysocki, along with our Ag Director, Bridgette Readel. And Bridgette, how was your weekend? Did you get to watch some football?
Oh, yeah. There was plenty of time to watch football. It was definitely a reasonably good chance to watch some decent football. I wasn't racing into who was going to play better or anything like that. I had no bets on it, so whatever happened, happened. That was good.
Were you hoping after that horrible first half? I was hoping that they were gonna.
You say horrible like you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan.
Well, if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, that was a horrible first half. And I was hoping that they were going to stick Wentz in. Like, hey, let's try something here because whatever we're doing isn't working. Yeah. But they never pulled the trigger, so, oh well.
Nope. In fact, I saw him at the end of the game giving kind of like the high fives and whatnot to other people. But yeah, overall, did not really see any action out of him during the game.
That's too bad. Too bad. Favorite commercial, did you have one?
I thought the Instacart was pretty cool, where it had all of the food mascots running down the street. So it was the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Yep.
For those of us who remember the Kool-Aid pitcher, the
yep.
Jolly Green Giant, etc. That one was good. I did laugh a lot at that one. And just Harrison Ford's last line in the Jeep commercial, I think, is the one that made everybody laugh hard.
Yeah, that was a good one too. The flying mustache from the Pringles, that was pretty original.
That was all right.
That was all right. And the seal one was I laughed, but that was a little creepy.
I think Lay's potato chips did a nice job of tying back family farms to their product.
Yep.
So that was very good with the little girl planting the potato.
That was cool.
I did have some people ask me if she planted an egg. No, not an egg. That was a potato. So.
Oh man, well it's a good. Yeah, they had a good game. At least if you're an Eagles fan, but that was a tough one to watch if you're a KC fan.
Yeah.
I know Gary Lezak was. He was quite upset, but he even knew. He's like, this is going to be a tough game. I don't know why everybody thinks this is going to be easy. And it was a real tough game for them, unfortunately, or fortunately.
Yeah, honest. It's not going to be easy to do 3 games like that. It just won't be. And the Eagles came in loaded for bear, literally.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we've got some stormy weather, not in our area, but down to our south. I've had a few people email me. They're driving south later this week, going towards Kansas City, and I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it Tuesday or Wednesday, as a big storm system is traversing to our south this week, while we have just cold air that's entrenched. In fact, numerous advisories and warnings for the cold are issued across the area into Minnesota, and that'll be the case for the next couple of days. Coldest air, some of the coldest air of the season, moving in from Canada. Currently, we're either side of 0, and we're not going to move much today under partly cloudy skies, about 5 above for the rest of the afternoon with northwest winds 10 to 20. Partly cloudy tonight. We'll drop down to about 10 to 15 below with wind chills about 25 to 35 below, even colder than that, just out to our west. And Tuesday, we're not even going to get above 0, about 1 below, and then a slow climb out of the deep freeze with single digits Wednesday and Thursday, and then back into the teens on Friday. But there is a slight chance for a little light snow Friday before we go back into the single digits for highs over the weekend. So no big storms in sight. And towards the end of the month, we go into the drier part of the LRC cycle with the northwest flow. What that means is we'll see occasional clippers now and then, but no big storms on the horizon. Somebody emailed me, what about the November storm, which cycles back after the 18th of this month? And I just think that this cold air is going to be deeply enough entrenched where that main storm track, unfortunately, it's going to be affecting the central plains instead of having that storm come up north. Now, when that cycles back in about 43 days or so, that would put us, what are we looking at? End of March into the first few weeks in April, when that stormy pattern cycles back. With that jet stream moving north as spring comes a little closer, I do believe we're going to get a lot more precip out of that during the next cycle, end of March into first couple weeks of April. So hang tight. We're not done with the snow yet this season, obviously, but still, it's not only have we been in a snow drought, the Central Plains, which are going to get hit here over the next few days, they've been in a terrible snow drought, and they really need the moisture bad. And thankfully, they're going to get some out of this next system.
At this point, I'm not going to worry about getting snow or moisture. We're already midway through February. Let's just start thinking ahead about spring and when we're going to get rain. That's probably the greater question I have, is when that's going to be able to happen.
Right.
Because that's going to make a big difference for many of us.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
We're going to try to take as much of that as we can. And let's not forget, as we talk about weather, we want to make sure that you know that our weather update is brought by Ryan Bonsack, Equitable Agri-Finance. He is providing long-term fixed rates for farmland financing, and he's really here to help both a farm and a ranch. So give Ryan a call, 701-261-6529. Visit with him about what you may see as a need for your farm or operation. He would be glad to help. So I am diligently getting some photos here lined up for our guest today. I am very excited to have with coming up later the Grain Weevil. We have had the discussion with them before, but now it's not just a prototype. It's actually a piece of equipment that can be purchased and used. And the Grain Weevil is what I would call the Roomba for the grain bins. It actually looks like a little Roomba. It moves through the grain, levels out bins, but also knocks down those chunks that get hung up due to too much moisture in the grain. And when people go into the bin, that's where we have bin entrapment. So the Grain Weevil really eliminates that need for a person to go inside the bin and potentially be harmed. Bin entrapment stories are not usually a positive ending, not just for the farmer involved, but also for the community. Because as we know, so many of our small towns, local AMS is your friends and your neighbors, and you never want to have that gut-wrenching call of a bin entrapment with someone that you know. So I'm excited to be talking to Chad today about the Grain Weevil. I got to visit with him down at FarmCon in Kansas City earlier this year and asked a kabillion questions. Hopefully he remembers the answers to all of them that I quizzed him on pretty hard down there. It'll be great.
How long has that been around, Bridgette, the Grain Weevil?
That's gonna be a great question. Gonna be a great question for him. It was probably about a year and a half ago we had them on just talking about the prototype.
I remember.
Now they're ready to actually bring it out.
That's fantastic. Hey, anything that can save lives.
Cool.
I mean, that's wonderful.
Well, yeah, absolutely. For as long as we can get folks to not have to go into the bins, to not have to, and plus it's not just if you have an entrapment, but it prevents the grain dust in your lungs and so many other things as well. Plus it's more of an efficiency tool. You don't have to have your labor doing those things as well. And interesting to note, I read a article this morning talking about students who were born in the year 2007 are now all turning 18 and to go off to college this fall, many of them anyway. But we are going to see a huge drop off in the amount of students going to college because our birth rates have dropped so incredibly. So we're going to have a lot less kids going off to school. That means we have less people coming into our workforce overall, whether you were going to college or not. So if we are seeing that as a big change, all of our discussion about artificial intelligence, robotic technology really matters when you are facing the shortfall of somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 million people in your workforce just due to a lower birth rate very soon. So that's a big hurdle to overcome. And one of the ways that we can do that is with products like the Grain Weevil as one of them. There's a lot more. Now, if you are thinking about your labor needs on the farm and don't exactly know what you're going to be doing for the next year, maybe two, there are things like the H-2A visa program where you can get temporary agriculturally related help from overseas. And H-2B is temporary non-ag help. Now, there are webinars going on, and one of them is being done by the Ag Retailers Association, ARA, to help explain the differences, the paperwork, how to get through it. If you're a farmer and you're thinking ahead about what you might need for H-2A and H-2B employment needs, you can drop me an email, ag@flagfamily.com, and I will send you the link so that you can register for some of these webinars and try to find out more information. As always, you can even send emails to me as well as to Dean, weather@flagfamily.com. And you can be watching us on YouTube, Facebook. You'll find us on those pages live streaming every day, and Acres TV. And if you haven't downloaded the Acres TV app yet, please do. It's considered the Netflix of farming, and you can find all sorts of content creators, active farmers, those involved in the industry who can help you learn so much more. In fact, not everybody's going to talk about the price of eggs, but that's probably the biggest question I get these days is, why are eggs so expensive? So I'll try to keep answering that for you guys, but you'll also want to hear the opinion of others, and you can do that when you sign into something like Acres TV and pick up information there.
That, and how long is it going to last? I mean, $6.99 to $7.99 at the store for for a dozen eggs.
Well, if you listen to any economists, it's not going to go down anytime soon, and for a number of reasons. One, since 2022, we have reduced our flocks, if you will. I'm trying to find a nice way of
the
saying
right way.
Yeah, 180 million chickens. 180 million. Okay. Do backyard flocks still get bird flu? Yes, they do. But when you only have 10 hens that need to be eliminated versus 20,000 in a barn, makes a really big difference on what's happening. Now that we have that many less hens laying, you can't just turn on a machine like you do for peeps at Easter time and get those little confectionery chicks. You have to raise them, and they take time until they're ready to start laying more eggs. The difference in that is you're keeping the laying hens longer. Older hens don't lay as many eggs, and we're in a wintertime cycle where, because of our shorter days, hens don't lay as many eggs either. Older hens have more brittle shells, just naturally because of their bodies. And when you have more brittle shells, you have more breakage, so you have less eggs making it to market. I mean, all these things come in together. We're still finding dead birds because of bird flu in the wildlife population. So it's not going away anytime soon. Oh, and this is still considered the holiday baking season through Easter. Those are all those reasons why.
Man.
Mm-hmm.
All
What's
right.
going on?
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, when we come back again, we'll have Chad on with the Grain Weevil. So if you have any questions for Chad, be sure to give us a call, 701-293-9000. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus, where we have the sheer pleasure of being joined today by Chad Johnson with the Grain Weevil. Now, some of you have heard us talk about the Grain Weevil before. You've maybe even seen some advertisements, but the reality is, do you really know what it can do? Because I rapid fired a lot of questions at Chad just so I got the inside scoop on it. So, Chad, how are you? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm doing great, thank you. My name is Chad Johnson, the CEO and co-founder of the Grain Weevil. Got to build this project with my son Ben, who's our electronics and robotics engineer.
Well, for those who haven't heard your story, what was the impetus of the start? What was the spark that said this is why we should build the Grain Weevil?
Sure, it's a really cool story. We're building an educational program, and my son happened to be the guinea pig for that program, and had built a robot for a completely different reason. But one of our local friends and farmers there in Giltner, Nebraska, had seen that robot, and he said, "Man, if you could build something like that, build me one to keep me out of a grain bin." My son and I, neither one had ever been in a grain bin, so our answer was pretty naive. Sure, we'll give it a shot. And so that was the challenge. Is hey, there's got to be something. So we started digging in. He was in college. My son was in college at the time, and so we didn't work on it very often. But it's what we would do when he'd come home. We'd go out in the shop and tinker around a little bit. And in March of 2020, we finally got a little robot to work. It moved it on the surface of the grain. It didn't do hardly anything, but it was 3D printed and duct taped together. It's ugly looking little thing, um, but it went viral, and we got several hundred direct messages just with questions. Hey, can it do this? Can it do that? And we kind of realized that we may be on to something, and that's when we really started pursuing this as a business option.
Now,
All right.
Greg, is this available on the market right now? It's not like, is there a stereotype, or is this actually available for purchase for any of our ag community?
So, so right now, the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
So we have 50 of them out in the wild right now, and we have 9 bin assist partners, and those bin assist partners basically go right through the Midwest. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any up in the northern plains yet, but those business partners are providing robots as a service. So if you need something
Mhm.
done, they can come out to the farm and do that service for you. But we're now taking pre-orders for robots to be manufactured and delivered in September. So we have robots out there right now for services, and then we're selling robots to be delivered in September.
Okay, let's start with the very beginning, what this thing is. And we've got a picture of it, I believe, if we can put that up on the screen for those watching on our live stream. I consider it the Roomba of the grain bin, right? So explain how this little guy works in the grain, if you would, Chad.
All right, sounds good. So our whole challenge with the robot was to figure out how to maneuver on the surface of the grain and all at the same time actually be able to do some work. So it may seem pretty obvious now if you look there. It's using augers to drive the robot, and that was not our first guess. I mean, we tried all kinds of things like tank treads and snowmobile type tracks, and then we're like, man, we could drive a robot with an auger. And so once we did that, the idea is the robot will scurry across the surface of the grain. While the auger is engaging with that grain, it agitates that and encourages it to flow. So for a long time, we just used the augers, but now on the back of the robot, we have what we call our grain scoop. It's pretty much a mud flap if it's driving forward, but when you drive backwards, it engages that scoop. So our goal is to, one, if we need to, level grain bins, and that's what the scoop shovel is really good at. This little robot can level grain faster than a human, um, and so especially humans in the same shape that I'm in, it could go a lot faster than the human being. So It actually does a lot of work, and most people are extremely surprised at how much this little robot can get done. Uh, a lot of people have also seen the crust breakups. So if you do
Hmm.
have a crust that forms, the robot, we haven't found a grain crust that we can't chew through up and blend off so that you don't get your sumps plugged. It chews right through, blends it right out, and it's been really successful. The other aspect of it is we can actually push grain through the extraction augers as well to help in the efficiency of that whole process of extracting your grain. So it's a start to finish grain bin management robot. Our ultimate goal is the higher quality of your grain, the less likely is you have a problem. And with our mission, there, to have no boots in the grain. No time should you ever have to go into a grain bin when there's grain in it.
That is exactly right. We don't want people inside there, which begs the question, how does the grain weevil get inside the bin, Chad? What do you do? It's not like a cat that you can just toss in there. How do you do it?
Yeah, yeah. So we have a winching system that uh, permanently attaches to the bin. It's a very inexpensive um, winch that pulls the grain weevil from the ground up, rotate it in, and drop it into the hatch door, and then that operates inside the grain bin. And then you can move the robot and all of the expensive parts from grain bin to grain bin. But that winching system, we worked on some portable systems and some other, trying to make it as flexible as we can. Um, Getting that robot in and out is actually, it presented some hazards in itself. It weighs 50 pounds. It's awkward. It's not easy to carry, and so we don't want you to carry it up the staircases or, put it on like a backpack
Hmm.
and try to go up a ladder. So that's where that winching system works. It's a drill-based winch, so it pulls the robot right up, drops it off in the grain bin, and away it goes.
So would you put the robot in the bin and winch it up before you fill the bin and so it stays at the top? Or do you winch it up the outside of the bin and then drop it down and through the hole on the top of the cone?
Yeah. So we drop it on the winch it up on the outside, drop it through the man hatch, the
Okay.
hatch door. We don't have to go all the way to the top hatch. So it goes through the
Ah,
side
okay.
door at the top, um, and
Hmm.
we can run throughout the process. So you load a handful of trucks in there, especially if it's coming out of that dryer, and you want to get it nice and level before you put on different moisture grain on top of it so that you can maximize the airflow and what we call actively optimize the stored grain. So you can level in between truckloads if you want to, or at the end of the day so you don't start to get those midline crusts that form when there's different levels of moisture and temperature.
Chad, there's so many more questions to ask, but please don't go anywhere. We have our bottom of the hour news, and we're going to return from that. And there's a lot of other things that I want to ask, including first thing that always comes to mind on the farm is let's talk about repairs and what it takes and what the wear parts are like, etc. So we're going to get to that and more when we return with Chad Johnson from the Grain Weevil. Welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus and our discussion with Chad Johnson. He's with the Grain Weevil. And we've been talking about how this little machine does such great work inside the bin to prevent people from having to go in there in the event of moving grain, etc. And Chad, before we went to hear our news, one of the questions I have for you is you mentioned that it doesn't have little paddles, it has little augers that turn, and that's its wheels or its feet, if you will. Do those wear out, and is it an easy replacement if a farmer needs to replace the little tiny auger, or I shouldn't say tiny, but the small auger on it?
So first of all, it lasts a lot longer than you think it would. Most people think of augers where they're either in a partial tube or in a solid, grain leg tube, um, where the grain is actually it's pressurized around the auger, so you get a lot of wear. But the way the
Hmm.
robot works, the grain is free flowing; it falls away from the augers, so the augers show very little wear. Start to get down towards the bottom where you start bouncing off the metal floor and those kind of things. You'll get some nicks and cracks, but for the most part, the grain um, it's going to be a long time before those augers wear out. But it's also one bolt on the end of the auger and it slides off, and you slide a new one on. Um, Probably the one piece that we're mostly concerned about if we're talking about a 5-year lifespan will be those gearboxes.
Uh-huh.
So maybe once every 3 years or so, maybe 5 years, depending on how much you use them. But it takes about 4 minutes to swap off a gearbox, and so all the rest of the stuff that's built inside of that robot is built to be extremely robust and very much will last the full lifetime of the robot.
I'm watching the video as it gets picked up by its little hook to get lifted out of the bin, and
Yes.
it's really a pretty simplistic situation. Now, what is the software like? Because I do remember you saying there's an app for it to control, and what are some of the functionalities that you can control with this?
So this robot version is human operated with some autonomous features. So what that means is we have a camera system and a remote control that the human sits there and operates. Um, we try to build the robot as we say as dumb as possible. So the least amount of decision making that the robot can do on its own, the better, just because of the environment that it's in. So this version, its capabilities can find a peak and run a pattern. Uh, Currently, it cannot detect rope sensors quite yet. We can here in the robot shop, just not out in the real grain bins yet, as we're working through that. The neat part about all of this is that it's upgradable. So each time we make it better at recognizing obstacles, we can upgrade your robot, and that's all a part of the system. So very soon you'll be able to still have to keep an eye on it, but you don't have to operate it. Version 2 will be the full autonomous throw it in the grain bin, go watch the Chiefs play football and not have to worry about it. But that's that's a couple of years away yet. So this one is all about getting work done, and so the robot, like I said, senses up and down, can tell where the slopes are, but it still will. It'll run into things if you're not paying attention.
It's just watching the video, Chad. It's our producer said it's almost hypnotic, and even more so with
Yes.
what he referred to as party lights on the robot as well.
Yeah.
We
Well, the party lights. Oh,
no, go
I was
ahead,
going to
go
say
ahead,
the
Chad.
party lights are the funniest thing. Uh, we've been about 300 million views on social media, and if you find something on TikTok or Twitter or whatever, the most common question is, it's a robot. Why does it have lights? And so you bring that up. It's pretty funny. So the main headlights are on there to give the camera some depth perception,
Right.
and then the color coded lights on there just give you indications. It tells you when your battery's starting to go low. It tells you all sorts of different indicators, which are all part of requirements, even though human beings aren't allowed to be in the grain bin while the robots are running. we still have to meet all those safety requirements of an autonomous robot, which includes signal lights to tell you that it's operating.
Gotcha. Now, on average, there's roughly 20 deaths per year, unfortunately, from people dying in grain bins. Now, we had an email question from one of our listeners asking, do you know if there's any insurance breaks that they will get if they get one of these grain weevils?
So as of right now, the answer to that is not yet. We are working with several insurance companies, and obviously they have a vested interest in the safety of their customers. As we develop more, we're able to demonstrate the reduction in risks, and so as it gets adopted more, then the insurance companies are more likely to look at that and say, maybe you're in a different risk category because no one ever goes into a grain bin. And so we're working on those, and I think we'll eventually get to the point that the answer to that can be yes. We don't have enough numbers out there yet for them to really look at it and say, okay, this really does make that difference.
Yeah.
So, Chad, one of the things you and I talked about was the safety record that this thing can have when it comes to charging, because grain dust explosions happen. So how do we avoid that with the Grain Weevil?
Well, the robot is designed to be spark-free and ignition-free. So everything that's built around this robot is to be able to operate in those Class 2 Div 1 dust explosion environments, which even grain bins on the farm are dangerous, but they're not classified hazardous locations like the commercial facilities. So we've built this to ensure that there can't be any fires, no sparks, no temperatures hot enough to ignite the dust. The charging is one of the most dangerous times of any kind of a battery powered machine. So we pull the robot out of the grain bin to charge and then drop it back down into that dust environment as a fully charged robot.
This thing is so wild. And just what you said, I've emphasized the use on farm, but this could be used in commercial locations as well, correct?
So as of today, we can use it in commercial facilities in their flat storage or their outdoor piles. We're still working on that Class 2 Div 1 hazardous certification before we can actually get into their grain bins and their upright silos. We have to have that stamp of approval. We've passed all of our internal tests for that, but getting through all of the UL testing and the dust explosion side of that, so there's a nice big stamp that says it's safe. We're still in that process.
What about other granular materials, fertilizer bins? I think about just some of the areas I've been in the past where you just have large quantities of granular, whether it's like the monolithic clays that get used as herbicide carriers, etc. Would the Grain Weevil have a good fit in those places as well?
Yes, so it's kind of interesting. Out of all of our demand through emails and phone calls, only about a third of that is now grain. So you can imagine how excited the grain industry is. But fertilizer and cement and sugar and salt and pistachios and every granular material you can think of has reached out to us and started to inquire about what the robot could do in those different materials. We work really, really well in the semi-solid ones that flow a little bit like grain does. Our new version is designed to go in more of the cakey materials like the soy meal and those kind of things. This one can work in that, but the new version is designed for that. So it will be, like I said, that one's a couple of years out. It always takes a few years to build robots. So we always have to start thinking about what's next. But pretty much any granular material you can put into a grain bin or on a pile, our robot can manage.
When you have a Grain Weevil charged up, what's the lifespan of that charging time? So if you've charged for a while, how long can it run before it needs to go back and charge again?
So pretty much any environment, no matter what the situation, whether it's a crust or leveling. We can run the robot as hard as we can for an hour, and then it takes
Okay.
20 minutes to recharge. If you're in nice dry grain, you can eke out about 90 minutes of runtime, but the efficiencies are really, you know, put it up at 75% speed and run it as fast as you can drive it, and really just get a lot of work done in that hour. Do the 20-minute recharge. We do have a supercharger upgrade that if you have 220 outlets at your bin sites, you can charge the robot in less than 12 minutes.
Uh,
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
if I'm gonna buy something, I'm buying the supercharged version, Chad. I can tell you that right now. That's the way this needs
Well,
to go.
not everybody has the 220 outlets at their grain bins though, so
True.
that's
That's true.
the distinction there. So
You mentioned bin assist partners, uh, and you didn't have any in our region. Are you actively looking for folks to be bin assist partners for up here? So, if you are, and how could farmers, other organizations find you if they want to ask more questions and really learn where they can start buying the Grain Weevil?
sure. So we're really starting to do this first release um, in the Midwest. This fall, we'll start to look to expand that into the northern plains. We want to get want to be close enough that we can provide a great service for these first batches as we roll out. Every time you roll out a robot, it's a different experience, and so we're trying to do it right. We're trying to do it safely. So we'll be looking for expanding that Benesis network up into the northern plains, probably sometime during towards the end of harvest this fall. So, um, and there's all sorts of information on our website about how to contact us if you don't have a Benesis partner in your area, and that just gives us a good sense of where we need to move and make sure that we could get as many people robots as soon as we can. But like I said, doing it safely and doing it in a way that makes sure everybody has a good experience with this new. It's new to us as well. It's the first time we've put robots out into the wild, so we want to make sure that they work the way they're supposed to, and people are using them and using them safely.
I am very excited to see this being used more and more often. So, thank you to Chad Johnson with the Grain Weevil for joining us today and sharing all the details that are going on with it. Really appreciate that, Chad.
I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chad. Well, when we come
All
back,
right, folks.
when we come back, we'll take another look at the weather, and Bridgette's got some ag topics to talk about as well. It's a cold forecast, obviously, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus, 1:53 in the afternoon. And it's a cold one out there. Temperatures 1 above. We're right around the 0 mark across much of the area, give or take a degree either side. And we're not going to move much today. And again, cold weather advisories and cold weather warnings, extreme cold warnings, I should say, are in effect. If you're not sure what that is, it's the same thing as a wind chill advisory, wind chill warning that used to be what was issued for many, many years. So it sounds a little different, but it's the same thing. It means wind chills are going to be down to about 20 to some spots as cold as 40 below. So that's dangerous. You can get frostbite in a matter of minutes if you're out. So make sure if you're going to be doing any traveling, the winter weather survival kit, you should have that in the car anyways this time of the year, and layers of clothing if you're going to be outside, and gloves, hat, the whole thing. So cold weather sticks around through this week. Slight warming by Friday, but not much. And then slight chance of light snow Friday, late in the day. And then more cold air dumps in as we head into the weekend. Not a lot of snow in the forecast, but plenty of cold weather in the forecast. And like you said, Bridgette, earlier in the show, with egg prices being as high as they are, yeah, the hens don't like laying many eggs when it's this cold outside. And I can't say I blame them.
Well, I wouldn't.
I can't say I blame them.
It's a short day. It's cold out there. For the love of God, I'm not going through all that extra work. Who are we kidding?
Right?
I'd make a terrible hen. But, with all of the concerns about food and supply, we hear this quite a lot. It's not just your imagination that you are hearing more food recalls going on. In fact, since 2019, we've had quite a bit of an uptick. We've had just over 1,900 food recalls or cosmetic recalls through the Food and Drug Administration. And it's things like we heard Boar's Head Deli Meats had a recall. E. coli contaminated McDonald's quarter pounders on the onions. Costco had a massive recall recently on eggs, etc. So what's going on? Well, there's a couple of things. One of them is simply the fact that realistically, we learn that much faster. When there's a recall, word spreads like wildfire because we're all texting, calling, and we're putting it on social media. So we see it much more quickly. The government may not even react as fast as consumers do. More of our food is actually imported, and that makes it very much harder to inspect as well. When you look at job openings, how often do you see something for inspectors and so forth? Well, we're just short of people to be doing some of the work that should be done. Thirdly, you have more and more folks who want natural foods, and that can sometimes circumvent traditional inspection channels as well. For instance, if you're buying locally, you need to always make sure that have those things been washed, because maybe not. For instance, we get eggs locally, and my husband said, "Oh, we get our eggs, they're washed and cleaned and everything." And I said, "Actually, they're not. They don't get washed because she doesn't want to take the bloom off of them. Because when you take the bloom off of the eggs by washing them, then they have to be refrigerated. Their shelf life decreases." So even in your own household, you have to make sure you know how things have been processed or inspected. And then lastly, there's been a lot of consolidation in the food industry, food and production. Now, inherently, that's not a bad thing. That can help us to keep costs lower in many cases. But when something goes wrong, it's just that much bigger, more high profile, affects that many more places. So it's really a combination of things that can happen. I saw a suggestion that maybe one way to make it better is if we help incentivize companies to do better jobs of inspections, take on new technologies to prevent food contamination, maybe they could be rewarded with tax credits. That's being done with electric cars. What if we started doing it with some of our food processes as well? So that could be the case. And really in today's world, a lot of those inspection forms that happen through USDA, through the processing, instead of burying them on a governmental website, which those usually are not really great to navigate, it could be posted in real time on a number of other media platforms so people could see it more regularly and feel more confident with it. I don't know what that might look like yet, but those are all reasons to keep in mind. So are you seeing more recalls? You are. Most of that has to do with just a higher elevation of awareness more than anything right now. So, and they probably aren't going to slow down quite yet. We'll see how it goes.
Right.
Now, when it comes to moving that product around, trucking is not always the most efficient. So in fact, Barge traffic on the Mississippi River alone had over 43 million truckloads get hauled up and down that river. So there's a reason why we get very concerned when river levels fall for barge traffic. It would have been very much more expensive as well to be trucking. A gallon of fuel carries a ton of freight 675 miles by water, 472 by rail, but just 150 by truck. So notably, inland towing is the only mode of the three that really improved its fuel efficiency since even 2009. One single barge can carry over 58,000 bushels of wheat. That's enough to bake a loaf of bread for every person in the state of Oklahoma. So barge traffic matters. We want some more increase in those river levels as soon as we can.
No doubt, no doubt. And then that's midsection of the country, which has been in some drought conditions. And thankfully, this looks a little wetter as we head into spring. So for Bridgette, myself, want to thank everybody for joining us here on Weather and Ag in Focus. Don't go anywhere. The Jay Thomas Show, it's coming up next.